Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're looking at clause. In this video, we are going to be looking at the meaning of clause and the different types of clause. A clause is a group of related words with a finite verb. A finite verb is the main verb of the sentence. It is the verb that carries the action of the subject. I want to believe you already know what subject is. A finite verb is a verb that carries the meaning of the sentence. Clause is divided into two major parts: main clause or independent clause, subordinate clause or dependent clause. Now we are going to look at these two main types of clause and also look at the subcategories of subordinate clause. Now let's look at main clause. Main clause is also called independent clause. It is a clause that can stand on its own and make a complete sense. It is like a simple sentence. Main clause is that part of a sentence that can make a complete sense on its own when detached from the rest of the sentence. Let's look at some examples. He bought the car which his father is driving. She took the money which I gave her. Let's consider the first example. He bought the car which his father is driving. He bought the car is the main clause of the sentence because he bought the car actually makes a complete sense without the rest of the sentence. In the second example, she took the money which I gave to her. She took the money is the main clause of the sentence because she took the money actually makes a complete sense without the rest of the sentence. When someone says she took the money, you'll be able to understand the person without requiring the person to further explain the sentence. Let's look at subordinate clause. It is also called dependent clause. It is a clause that cannot stand on its own and make a complete sense when it is detached from the rest of the sentence. It depends on the main clause to make a complete sense. Unlike the main clause, the subordinate clause requires the main clause to make a complete sense in the sentence. Now let's look at some examples. He bought the car which his father is driving. He makes everyone smile whenever he comes. In the first example, he bought the car which his father is driving. Which his father is driving is the subordinate clause or the dependent clause because it depends on the main clause he bought the car to make a complete sense. If someone tells you which his father is driving, you will not be able to understand the person because you require more information on what exactly the father is driving and what happened to the thing that the father is driving. In the second example, he makes everyone smile whenever he comes. The dependent clause is whenever he comes because it depends on the main clause he makes everyone smile to make a complete sense. Just as in the first example, if someone tells you whenever he comes, you will not be able to understand the person fully. You'll be requiring more information on what happens whenever he comes. Now let's look at the different types of subordinate clause. We have the noun clause, the adjective clause, and the adverb clause. The first type of subordinate clause that we're going to learn is noun clause. Noun clause performs the function of a noun in a sentence. It can function as the subject of a verb, object of a verb, or object of a preposition. Subject of a verb, object of a verb, or as an object of a preposition. I hope you know that subject of a verb is the noun or pronoun that initiates the action of the verb in a sentence. And object of a verb is the noun or pronoun that receives the action of the verb. And object of a preposition is the noun or pronoun that comes after the preposition in a sentence. Now let's look at some examples. What makes Nigeria rich is oil. I saw what the boy did. Please tell me what you know about this. Okay, in the first example, what makes Nigeria rich is oil. What makes Nigeria rich is a noun clause functioning as the subject of the verb is. And in the second example, I saw what the boy did. What the boy did is a noun clause functioning as the object of the verb saw. Then in the third example, please tell me what you know about this. What you know about this is a noun clause functioning as the object of the verb tell. Now let's look at adjective clause. Adjective clause performs the function of an adjective, which is to modify or qualify a noun or pronoun. That is, it tells us more about a noun. It gives us more information concerning a noun or a pronoun in a sentence. Now let's look at some examples. People who break the law should be punished. The house which Jack built has collapsed. So in the first example, who break the law is an adjective clause because it gives us more information about people, which is a noun. Now let's look at the second example. The house which Jack built has collapsed. Which Jack built is an adjective clause because it tells us more about the noun house, or it gives us more information about the house. The next type of clause we are going to consider is adverb clause. Adverb clause performs the function of an adverb, which is to qualify or modify a verb, an adjective or another adverb. But the most common function of an adverb clause is to qualify a verb. Now let's look at the different types of adverb clause that we have. We have adverb clause of time, adverb clause of place, adverb clause of reason, adverb clause of condition, and adverb clause of manner. We are going to learn each of these different types of adverb clause. So we are going to start with adverb clause of time. Adverb clause of time answers the question when. It talks about times and periods. It tells you when something happened or when something will happen. It just tells you about time and period. Whenever he is here, he quarrels with everyone. We kept on working until John arrived. Whenever he is here is an adverb clause of time because it answers the question when. And according to the sentence, it tells you when quarrel always happens. I earlier said, adverb clause usually qualify a verb, and in the sentence, whenever he is here is an adverb clause qualifying the verb quarrels. In the second example, we kept on working until John arrived. Until John arrived is an adverb clause of time qualifying the verb working. Let's move over to the next one, adverb clause of place. Adverb clause of place answers the question where. It tells you where something happened, where something is happening, or where something will happen. For example, this is where it all started. I will be at the office tomorrow. In the first example, where it all started is an adverb clause of place qualifying the verb is. Where it all started tells us about place. And in the second example, I will be at the office tomorrow. At the office tomorrow is an adverb clause of place qualifying the verb be. I know you'll be wondering why it has to qualify the verb be and not will. It has to qualify the verb be because will is an auxiliary verb helping the main verb be. Be is the main verb of that sentence. Now let's look at adverb clause of reason. Adverb clause of reason answers the question why. They are introduced by words like due to, since, owing to, because, as, and so many others. Adverb clause of reason tells us why something happened, or why something will happen, or why something is happening. It tells us why something is the way it is. Let's look at some examples. Because the zoo attendant disappeared, the lions starved to death. Since you promised to be there, I shall attend. In the first example, because the zoo attendant disappeared is an adverb clause of reason. It tells us the reason why the lions starved to death. As you already know, once it's an adverb clause, it will qualify a verb. So, because the zoo attendant disappeared is an adverb clause of reason, qualifying the verb starved. In the second example, since we promised to be there, I shall attend. Since we promised to be there is an adverb clause of reason, qualifying the verb shall. The next one we'll consider is adverb clause of condition. Adverb clause of condition answers the question on what condition. They are introduced by words like if, unless, etc. It tells us the condition on which something will happen. Let's look at some examples. Unless you hurry up, you may be late. Suppose you caught the thief, what would you do to him? In the first example, unless you hurry up, you may be late. Unless you hurry up is an adverb clause of condition. It tells us the condition on which you may be late. So it qualifies the verb may. And in the second example, suppose you caught the thief, what would you do to him? Suppose you caught the thief is an adverb clause of condition. It tells us the condition on which you would do something to him. Suppose you caught the thief qualifies the verb do. Next, let's look at adverb clause of concession and contrast. They are introduced by words like whilst, while, although, though, whereas, however, whoever, even if, etc. Adverb clause of concession and contrast tries to approve two contrasting ideas, two opposing ideas in a sentence. They are those clauses that usually contrast the idea in the main clause. Let's look at some examples. John is very strong, although he is young. Even if it rains, the function must hold. In the first example, John is very strong, although he is young. Although he is young is the subordinate clause, and it contrasts the idea that John is very strong, because a young person is not expected to be very strong. So that makes it an adverb clause of concession and contrast, and it qualifies the verb is. In the second example, even if it rains, the function must hold. Even if it rains is the subordinate clause, and it contrasts the idea in the main clause, the function must hold, because when it rains, functions are likely not to hold. So it is an adverb clause of concession and contrast, and it qualifies the verb hold, which is in the main clause. The next one we'll look at is adverb clause of comparison and degree. Adverb clause of comparison and degree answer the question to what extent. They are introduced by words like more than, as dash as. That dash you can fill it with as big as, small as, beautiful as, handsome as, etc. Let's look at some examples. Mary is as old as Jane. The lady in white is more beautiful than the lady in red. In the first example, the subordinate clause is as old as Jane. Jane is being compared to Mary. So that makes it an adverb clause of comparison and degree, and it qualifies the verb is. Lastly, let's look at adverb clause of manner. Adverb clause of manner answers the question how. They are generally introduced by words like as if, as though, as. It is a clause that describes. It tells you how something happened or how something is. It just gives a description. Let's look at some examples. You look as if you have succeeded. You talk as though you were not informed. In the first example, the subordinate clause is as if you have succeeded. As if you have succeeded gives us more information about the look. It tells us more about how you look. So, since it describes how you look, it's an adverb clause of manner, qualifying the verb look. In the second example, you talk as though you were not informed. As though you were not informed is the subordinate clause, and it describes the manner at which you talk. So, as though you were not informed is an adverb clause of manner, qualifying the verb talk. And that brings us to the end of the lesson. I hope you learned something. And if there's something you don't understand, please let me know at the comment section. And please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you.